Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 25 series, Can We Save the Oakland A's? And we are about to begin the free agency period of the 2027 to 2028 offseason. Have a lot of interesting decisions ahead of us. Thank you to those of you who have shared thoughts on what you would do in our situation. We'll talk about those as we get into the early stages of this episode. Want to address a few comments from the past episode up front. A couple of you, don't worry, I don't know where you live, and Darkosis both mentioned and noticed that Kenyon Middleton, who we traded for, was an $8 million contract for this upcoming year. And of course, I thought it was implied, but you could also have seen it if you looked very closely at your tiny screen and the write-up when we picked him up in the trade, if I went over it, although I can't remember whether I did that with him or just Kyle Bradish. But for a very mediocre player making an insane amount of money, it was obviously a negative contract. Baltimore just wanted to get rid of it, and you can see they retained almost all of it this year. So he is essentially a no-risk opportunity for us. Kyle Bradish, similarly, and then Domingo Germán, who we signed to a 3-year contract, but only 1 year guaranteed with team options for the next 2 seasons after that, are all relatively low-risk players that we can keep on the roster if we want to, or should easily be able to cut and or trade based on their contract situation. You can see we've only got 10 major league pitchers on our 26-man roster at this point, so we do have some work to do. Since the last episode, we also made a trade for the lefty reliever Kyle Nelson, who is now the only lefty on our staff. We've historically had a lefty or two in the rotation and then a few in the bullpen as well, but we traded away J.P. Sears this offseason. We let Jesus Soto and Ken Waldachuk both leave rather than offering them arbitration. And then we traded away Gabe Spire during the season. So we were lefty free very briefly, which is why we traded for Kyle Nelson. Did not have to give up too much to bring him on board. Victor Robles, veteran outfielder, and then Brandon Bielak, a veteran starter who were both in our minor league system. Nelson at least gives us a respectable left-handed arm out of the bullpen. He has been certainly an above-average league pitcher over the course of his career. Not going to change the world for us, but he at least, as I noted, gives us one lefty out of the bullpen. So pretty hard to imagine he won't be on the team, but certainly would think that through the Rule 5, through free agency, and continuing to peruse the trade market, hopefully we can add another lefty or two as this offseason moves along. And at the end of the last episode, we talked about the fact that we do have some money to potentially spend this offseason, and we were looking for a bat. The 4 players that I thought were most practical for us to potentially go after in terms of our salary constraints were Eloy Jimenez, Ketel Marte, Cedric Mullins, and Jesus Sanchez. And we have made a decision to go after one of those players. YME943, the notorious KEV, and Bald Sherlock all kind of came down on the side of Ketel Marte. One interesting point was that Darkosis said, don't do Ketel Marte. So we've certainly given that some thought as well. And both Darkosis and Bald Sherlock mentioned that they were also pretty intrigued by Hyo Endo, the infielder out of Japan. And those are the guys that we have spent the most time thinking about in terms of what to do in free agency. And as you can see here, for an initial offer, we've settled on making an offer to Ketel Marte. He was looking for $8 million a year over 3 years, so $24 million total, with a vesting option for the final season. We've offered him materially less, $18 million over 3 years, with team options in both the second and third seasons. So think that is certainly a manageable contract for us. What ultimately decided it, Mullins, just not as good a hitter as the other guys, didn't like the fragility, and he was looking for pretty material money for the A's. Jesus Sanchez, definitely intrigued by him. He's younger than Marte. The main factor was ultimately just the difference in money, with Sanchez looking for over $12 million a year, and also feel that, well, not just feel, but we know that with a 107 WRC plus, Sanchez over the course of his career has not been as productive an offensive player as Ketel Marte with a 116 WRC plus. So more money and a little less production for us overwhelmed Sanchez being materially younger. And then Jimenez was a tough decision, but he is looking for the most money of anyone on this list. And he's also looking for 6 years right now, which we didn't really want to commit to. So we have made the decision to potentially bring on Mr. Marte as a likely corner outfielder for us. He certainly can play a multitude of positions in the infield and even center field in the outfield, but envisioning him as a corner outfielder slash DH, and with that 60 outfield range, he'd be a nice addition to us, likely in left field defensively. So we will see what happens with that and talk about in more detail that contract if it ends up getting accepted. And now to Hyo Endo, who Darkosis really liked, and as I noted, Bald Sherlock thought might be a supplemental option to Marte, or perhaps someone to pursue instead. I get the interest in Endo. He's about to turn 29 years old, but he's still younger than the other 3 guys we've talked about. He's a very good defensive infielder with an above-average eye and potentially incredible power. The reticence in me making him an offer right now is primarily we only have low scouting accuracy on him, so I'm not going to throw close to $10 million a year at him. Darkosis certainly accurately noted that might be able to sign him for $7.5 when all is said and done, but right now he's looking for 4 years, $9.8 million. Wants a guarantee in the starting lineup, wants some bonuses. The low scouting accuracy is the key factor in why I'm not going to do anything with him right now. Don't love the lack of speed, but certainly with that glove and that potential power bat, I could get over that. But I am very concerned about the lack of contact, just a 40 ceiling, we think, and the horrible, disgusting Joey Gallo-esque number of strikeouts that he may potentially generate with that 30 avoid strikeout rating. My hope is that when we do get a scouting report back down the line, he looks a little better on those fronts than I think he does right now. But between the low scouting accuracy and the fact that I think he's going to struggle to bat 200 and struggle to avoid 200 plus strikeouts if he plays an entire season, I'm willing to wait on him a bit. We do, even with the offer out there to Marte, have some money to potentially spend on free agents. We could certainly bring him on board right now. I've just been playing back and forth, and we've got relatively high scouting and development budgets right now. We're still going to need to put more into the draft budget, but we could certainly tweak the numbers to make Endo work for us if we decide that's the path that we want to go down. One other thing that I noted in the comments to the last episode that has me a little concerned about Endo, despite that incredible home run power, he's a right-handed hitter, and you can see the very negative factor here for home runs for right-handed batters in Oakland. Granted, with 75 or 80 power, or even 70 if we're overestimating a little bit, he's still going to hit plenty of home runs when he does make contact, but not necessarily a perfect hitter for our park. One final thing to note before I finally put a bow on the initial free agent decisions. I did also like with Ketel Marte that he's very popular nationally and extremely popular locally. We definitely could use a nice boost to our fan interest, and hopefully Marte, if we do sign him, will help a small amount on that front. And there's a nice list of pretty high-quality pitchers out there on free agency this year. The issue is that many of them are far too expensive than we can afford, but we are keeping an eye on a few of the more interesting left-handers, particularly out there. If Jojo Romero's price comes down, he could be certainly an interesting arm for our bullpen. There's a few other lefties that we are paying attention to as well. Not going to necessarily make any moves to bring any on board right at this point. The hope is that there will be some further opportunities at lower prices as we move forward with the postseason or the off-season. And as I noted, we've also got the Rule 5 coming up, and the hope is that maybe there will be a interesting lefty reliever who ends up available to us in the Rule 5 draft as well. So we are going to start moving forward, finishing off November, getting into December, and approaching the Rule 5. One final thing to check in on, though, before we do that, the development lab, and we're less than a month into it, but things are actually going reasonably well. You can see we've got 6 of our 8 players on track with their progress. Bertrand Albrighton, unfortunately, is frustrated with his strength and conditioning program, but that's a pretty difficult program. And interesting, Luis Lara is struggling mightily with base running fundamentals, which we thought was going to be a pretty simple program for him, but we'll find out the answer to that in early December. And then we'll be able to get Lara or somebody else in for a relatively quick program after that. And one other thing that I had touched upon at the beginning of the offseason that I don't think I closed the loop on, we had let our team trainer's contract expire. We weren't in love with him because he was only okay in terms of preventing arm injuries. And we have found at least a short-term replacement. We only made I believe, a 3-year offer to Nick Kenny, but a pretty respectable trainer, given that his age was 66, and we like him. We don't love him. We didn't make a real long-term offer. It's very conceivable that he'll retire at the end of any given season, but a little better preventing arm injuries with that excellent rating. Not as good with fatigue recovery, which is where our previous trainer was legendary, but overall the balance is pretty decent for Nick Kenny, and hopefully he'll help us keep this team healthy going forward, and hopefully some of those strength and conditioning programs in the development lab will also end up being successful to aid in that effort. And we've simmed ahead a bit into the month of December. Still have not heard back from Ketel Marte. Would think that with the winter meetings a week away from the start, that we'll probably hear from him by the start of the winter meetings, if not before. Still waiting for our scouting report on Endo and actually Ken Q, who is a less realistic prospect for us, but still could be a pretty interesting player. Just think he's making too much money for him to be a practical player for us to go at. But a lot could be happening with those scouting reports coming back, hopefully over the next week or two, the start of the winter meetings, hopefully finding out what's going on with Ketel Marte, and then we'll also find out where we're going to be picking in the draft. We had the worst record most of the season. If we had had one of the first 3 records, that would have put us with that 16.5% probability of getting the number 1 overall pick when we get to the lottery. Fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at these things, we ended up having a pretty good September. to get our record up to 72-90, and we ended up with the fourth worst record in baseball, even though we were third in our division, a pretty bad division where we got by 2 teams in the standings. So certainly a lower probability of us getting the first overall pick, higher probability of us, falling somewhere further into the mid to high single digits in terms of where we draft. If we end up in the top 5, I'll be pretty happy, but certainly would love to see this thing picking first or, even second or third. Fourth is the earliest that we've picked in any of these drafts. It's where we're, if everything goes according to form, set to pick this year, and would love if in the upcoming 2028 draft we pick a little higher than that, and we'll find out about that shortly. And unfortunately, Luis Lara's base running program had a poor conclusion, didn't learn anything new, overexerted himself, and has some leg tightness and might now be more prone to injury. So that was a pretty miserable result. Leg proneness for injury increases from somewhat normal to bordering on fragile. So a pretty crappy result, all things considered, for a program that we expected would pretty easily be a success for us. And we do have the opportunity now to re-rack with Lara or somebody else. And we've actually still got time to get any of the programs completed with the timing of when the season begins and when the off-season began, which is a pretty nice bonus. There's part of me that wants to put him in a strength and conditioning program just because we know he's a little more prone to injuries with his legs now. But he's still normal injury proneness overall. There's also part of me that thinks maybe we just do another couple of the easy programs, but there's also a temptation to put him into a more detailed program with a lower likelihood of success. Looking at his ratings, clearly he could benefit from some work on his power. Not that he's ever going to be a great home run hitter, but there is certainly an opportunity for the 23-year-old to improve there, according to our scout. So that should make the likelihood of that maybe a little bit better than some of the ones where we already see him as being maxed out. And we're going to push the envelope with his legs. We're going to have him work on his base stealing technique for the next 4 to 5 weeks. It's also supposed to be very easy, like his previous program that didn't work out so well. We'll see if maybe we can get a little luckier over the next month. And as the winter meetings start, some good news. Ketel Marte has told us that he favors that offer that we've made to him. And even more importantly, we've moved up to the number 2 pick in the draft. Interesting that the Yankees moved up from 5 and we moved up from 4. The Rangers stayed at 3. And then the teams that were the 2 worst in baseball, I believe that was the Nationals and then was obviously someone else in our division. I don't even remember who it was at this point. The Angels, they both dropped back pretty significantly, so stinks to be them. But we're going to need to, actually I don't know if that's registered yet. I think we're going to need more than $11.5 million with the second overall pick, since we did move up from 4th. Since it just happened today, that may change when we move to tomorrow. But taking a look, I guess we can go in and see where everybody actually ended up in the draft. Yeah, the Nationals dropped from 1st to 7th, and the Angels from 2nd to 8th. So happy with our luck. A little bit of a bummer that we're not going to have a free look at anybody in the entire draft. But number 2 overall, especially for those of you who have been pushing me over the last few seasons to be more willing to potentially bring on a college player, could be a pretty interesting spot to potentially get the best college player in the upcoming draft, whoever that ends up being. And we've also gotten our scouting report back on Mr. Endo. And we're now high scouting accuracy. Doesn't honestly look all that different. We don't think he can get to that 80 power, but 75 is still exceptional. I still am pretty concerned about the lack of contact and the insane number of strikeouts he's going to have. Point brought up by Bald Sherlock and Darkosis is, this is a guy who's in his 20s who's probably got some trade value if you sign him to the right contract, and I do agree with that. We're going to keep an eye on him. We're going to actually also request another scouting report on him just to get that accuracy up to very high. I may make him an offer for just 1 year at a pretty low level now to engage with him. In fact, I think I will do that. Still looking for 4 years, $9.8 million. Don't think there's any way he takes a 1 year, $5 million contract, but we'll at least start a discussion with him. Not really what he was expecting, but he's still more than willing to talk to us. Looking for 4 years at $9.6 million a year, so he came down $200,000. I'm still going to wait to see what happens with Marte. Hopefully we'll get another scouting report on him before the end of December, and hopefully he'll still be on the market then. I'm not going to chase after him. I get the point. He's a really good defensive player. He's got incredible home run power. I just don't know that the guy's going to hit enough for me to not be extremely annoyed with him when he's batting 187 and striking out 240 times a year. And as I noted, the fact that his great right-handed power is not necessarily perfectly suited for Oakland, where we're going to be playing half our games, bothers me a little bit as well. And we've made it to the Rule 5. Still have not heard from Mr. Marte what he ultimately intends to do with the offer we've made to him, and still don't have an updated scouting report back on Mr. Endo, so just kind of holding tight and trying to be patient as far as the free agent class, but the hopes are that we'll get an opportunity in this Rule 5 draft to add some help for the bullpen, particularly maybe a left-handed arm. And who knows what else will be out there. The Rule 5s in this playthrough haven't tended to have some of the young talent that sneaks in past versions of the game that I've played. So maybe we're due for there to be a 22 or 23-year-old who could turn into something interesting that isn't protected. And unfortunately, I don't think there's any difference makers here in the Rule 5 draft. Not that you normally expect there to be true difference makers, but you always hold out that little bit of hope. Our scout recommends we go with Richard Fitz, a 28-year-old right-hander with below-average stuff, below average allowing home runs, fly ball tendencies. He's not all that interesting to me. We are going to go with a left-handed pitcher who might be in the mix to be in our bullpen. Zach Thompson, pretty average left-hander, 30 years old. He is on a minor league contract, so kind of no harm, no foul to bring him into camp and see if maybe he can ultimately lock down a position as a lefty in our bullpen. So we'll go ahead and draft Mr. Thompson here. There's a few other prospects, both as far as other lefties, other pitchers, and other position players. So I tend to think we may bring several players into camp, but not confident that more than one of them will ultimately end up making the 26-man roster. Oh, and stupid me with the number of players that we're always picking up. Zach Thompson is a guy that we picked up in a trade a few years ago, so he's already in our AAA system. So we don't need to draft Mr. Thompson because we already own him. Well, we don't own him. We control his rights. So instead of him, since I'm an idiot, We are going to go with Eric Lauer, but Eric Lauer is also someone who is sitting in our AAA system. So the left-handers that we may be looking for are already sitting within our organization. So given that the two lefties we like the most are already in our AAA system, we got to hope that no one takes them from us. But we are going to actually pivot to a batter who's intriguing to us, and it's an infielder that we don't really need. I kind of like our young infielders, but Oslevis Basabe, 27-year-old, you probably remember him. He was part of both our Yankees and Mariners mini-series a month or two ago in OOTP 25 when we started playing around with the game. Like his ability to make contact. He can play a lot of different positions, has a little bit of speed. I don't know that he makes our team, but willing to pick him up in the draft and bring him on board and see if perhaps he can compete for one of our infield spots. We will, of course, have Daryl Hernandez on the IL when the season begins with the injury that he's trying to recover from. So that does mean bringing in a little more competition in the infield probably is not the worst thing. And second round, we haven't lost either of the lefties in AAA. So we're going to go with Ariel Almonte, 24-year-old outfielder. Probably not quite ready to be a major leaguer even for the Oakland A's, although he was pretty good last year in high A ball, double A ball, and a very small sample size in AAA. Borderline fifth outfielder type statistics, but is a left-handed bat with a little bit of power who's competent defensively. So we'll bring Mr. Almonte into camp and see if he can maybe compete for a fifth outfielder position for us. And in the third round, I think we're going to make our final choice. We're going to bring in Angel Perdomo, 33-year-old reliever. Brilliant stuff. Slider, fastball, and changeup are all incredible. Poor control, below average in terms of allowing home runs, which with his extreme fly ball tendencies is potentially a little bit scary. He's been below average in terms of his ERA plus, but above average in terms of his FIP minus over the course of his major league career. In 168 and 2/3 innings, he has allowed 20 homers and 99 walks. So the concerns that we noted are there. He's also struck out a ridiculous 268 batters, though. Looking at his ratings, maybe as a lefty specialist, he could work out pretty interestingly. He's on a minor league contract, so it's not a big commitment. So we're going to go ahead and draft Mr. Perdomo, and that will likely be it for us here in the 2027 Rule 5. And we did unfortunately end up losing Victor Gonzalez, one of the lefty relievers in the Rule 5. But hopefully with the addition that we made in the Rule 5 draft and the other guy that we had in AAA, we've got some options there, along with the recent trade that we made for Mr. Nelson. And we still have hopefully time in free agency and time in the trade market over the next 3, 4, 5 months until the season gets going to get some more people into the mix to compete for roster spots in the spring. And we do have Kettle Marte signed. Unfortunately, the fans are not pleased that David Peterson is gone, who pitched in 26 games for us last year with a 4.50 ERA. He is well known. He's signed with the Rockies. We never made an offer to him, so the fans not happy about that. But they're very excited about Kettle Marte coming on board. So we were 37 before the negatives of Peterson and the positives of Marte, and we're now sitting at 40. So that's a move in the right direction there. Details on the contract, as we noted, average of $6 million a year for 3 years, but we did front load it $8 million this upcoming year guaranteed, and then team options for his mid-30s years at $5 million with $500,000 buyouts. So we can afford the money this upcoming year, and if things don't work out, we can easily get out of that contract. If things work out really well, he's probably a pretty decent bargain at $5 million a year. So happy to have Marte on board, and he will be a very important bat for us this upcoming season. And we do now have very high scouting accuracy on Mr. Endo. He is still on the market. I'm not going to go for him, at 9.8, 9.6, even if I could get him for 7.5, 8. Doesn't seem like the market for him is incredibly robust, and as intrigued as I am by his glove and his power, he's going to be turning 30 next offseason, and I don't think the guy can hit major league pitching. Now, doesn't mean that if the price comes down that I won't engage on him, because I do think there's a lot of really interesting things with him. He's pretty evenly balanced between his lefty and righty splits. Incredible power, pretty good batting eye against everybody, but he's going to strike out an insane amount of times and struggle to make contact against everybody as well. So I know some of you are screaming at me to try to sign him right now, but I'm not going to lie to you. You've heard my slander on Joey Gallo in previous episodes, if you've watched previous episodes, and when we look at the contact, gap power, and eye ratings, as well as the strikeouts, he doesn't look all that different from Joey Gallo. And as I've been very clear upon in the past, Joey Gallo will never be on one of my teams. And Luis Lara's unsuccessful winter in the development lab continues. No improvement working on his base stealing technique. So hasn't been all that productive so far. We're going to get another program going, probably likely with him. I know it seems like we are whistling in the wind with this one, but he is a guy that we have signed to a long-term deal. He's a young player. He should be our center fielder for years to come, so we're going to continue trying to invest in him, even if we're not having a lot of success right now. And since we've gotten poor and no results with Mr. Lara in base running fundamentals and base stealing techniques, which are supposed to be very easy for him, we're going to work on a hard program, trying to improve his defense in center field and see if maybe we can catch lightning in a bottle there. You'll see as the programs move forward, we're more than halfway through them, not doing quite as well as we were at the start of the episode. In fact, only Brian Rincon, Bubba Chandler, and Duncan Marston are on track now with their programs. Miller, Albright, and Cawley and Schoolcraft are all frustrated with their programs, but still plenty of time with 6 to 7 weeks to go for the ultimate results to be different. And we've made it finally to the start of international amateur free agency, so I'll finish off the episode by showing you the 9 players that we are considering that we've been bringing into camp most recently. 9 position players plus 1 pitcher, more accurately, and then leave the episode off there and give you an opportunity to, if you have any thoughts on what we should do, share them with us. We will once again have $5.7 million, so as much money to spend as anyone in this IAFA period beginning today. And according to our scout, there's some pretty interesting prospects out there. Center fielder, there will be several center fielders that we'll be talking about. Daniel Campos, Mr. Clean, left-handed hitter. I think his contact and his power could both be close to off the charts. Competent defensively, decent speed, high work ethic. Not too much to criticize him about. I think he could be a Very interesting hitter for us going forward. Arturo Carpio, another center fielder, doorbell Carpio. Not quite the contact, but really good gap power and excellent home run power. Not quite the same level of speed. Probably if we were going to go with one of those two guys, I think Campos, despite the fact he's looking for more money, would be the guy. We also don't have as good a relationship with Campos, but we've got the money, which can cover up just about anything. Jesus Escalante, a catcher, average defensively, but a very interesting bat for someone behind the plate. Looks like he's really a catcher. Could try him. Is a right-hander at first base. Yeah, he's probably a catcher. Another center fielder, Arturo Estrada, 16-year-old out of Venezuela. A real interesting prospect. Blistering speed, great personality, incredible contact and gap power. He is not a bad proxy for those of you who have followed me over the years for what Deshaun Seifu looked like, although he's an outfielder rather than an infielder. But think he could be a very interesting player for us as well. Arturo Estrada with the nickname John Thomas. Well done, OOTP. Well done. Starting pitcher, Andres Medina is very intriguing to me. Like the high work ethic, he's 16 years old, already throwing in the low to mid 90s, ground ball tendencies. Stuff could be off the charts with plus movement, plus control. Only a 4-pitch potential arsenal, and we are dependent on that changeup developing, which we think could be his best pitch, but we already view the changeup as not too far off major league quality. So I think we're probably okay there. Solid stamina, good at holding on runners. The question is how well the stuff ultimately develops, and can he keep the ball in the ballpark and improve his ability there. But pretty interesting prospect for Havoc Medina. Jorge Morales, a left fielder, nice, solid corner outfield bat, potentially off the charts power and an incredible eye. So home runs and walks galore. Not a ton of speed, not great defensively, but with the ability to draw walks and hit homers while making a decent level of contact, still could be a pretty interesting player. Another center fielder, David Padilla. Like the bat, love the eye. Probably not the direction that we'll go. Second baseman, Jorge Aramayo, 16-year-old out of the Dominican. Great personality, pretty decent speed, and a very solid and well-rounded bat. Another person with a odd nickname. His name is Jorge Aramayo, and his nickname is Eliezer Orlando. Domingo Preciado, 16-year-old out of Venezuela. Jetsam is his nickname. Pretty interesting bat, really good power, decent speed. Looks like a corner outfielder or first baseman. Probably not the direction that we'll go. I think some of the earlier guys that we talked about are probably higher on our list, but it's an interesting class. Last but not least, another center fielder, Santiago Espinoza, pretty well-balanced bat, although he's not going to draw a ton of walks. Like the intelligence, like the speed. I'll kind of let you know the handful of players I'm most interested in, and then you can kind of tell me where I'm right or wrong in the comments. If you want to. I'm not expecting or requesting it of you, but I would appreciate it. And the 4 guys I am most serious about, I think, are the center fielder, Daniel Campos, 75 contact with 75 power potentially. Good speed, good bunter, high work ethic, solid outfield range. I think he could potentially be an outstanding left fielder going forward. Pretty intriguing player to me. Center fielder Arturo Estrada, very different prospect, but off the charts ability to make contact, outstanding gap power, excellent speed, great personality. Another guy who I think could be an outstanding left fielder, but he could also play center or right. Has that personality to hopefully help his chances of development. Think he could be a very interesting hitter at or near the top of the order for almost any team. So I'm intrigued by John Thomas, Arturo Estrada as well. The pitcher, Andres Medina, is very intriguing to me. Like the work ethic, like the ground ball tendencies, like the potential for a 4-pitch arsenal, and the fact that his stuff could be off the charts with outstanding control and well above average movement makes him a guy that's going to be hard for me to say no to. And then the last of the top 4 that I really like, Jorge Morales. He's a hitter. Plus contact, plus gap power, and then exceptional power for home runs and an exceptional eye. He's an outfielder, a mediocre corner outfielder. He's got no speed. Could play him at first base. Wouldn't feel great about it there, but even as a DH, he's got the type of bat to make that work. Those are probably my top 4. They're looking for $3.2 million in the case of Campos, $2.6 Estrada, $3.6 Medina, and $3 million Morales. As I mentioned, we've got the ability to just go grab any one of them. If I wanted to get greedy, I might supplement in one of those 4 with Jorge Aramayo, who's only looking for $1.6 million. Pretty interesting infield prospect, great personality, very well-balanced bat that's above average to borderline excellent at everything. He's got some speed. Doesn't necessarily really have a defensive position. Could play left field. But don't love him defensively anywhere. But if that bat fully developed, he could certainly be a DH, or you would deal with below average defense somewhere. So there's part of me that thinks, is there a way to make an offer for one of the 4 guys I really like plus Aramayo, or do I not fool around and just go hard after the player that I really want, and then if there's some money left over after that, if it's enough for Aramayo, great. If we have to kind of go down and go after someone who's looking for not quite as much money, there are certainly guys who could help at the lower end of the spectrum. You know, you look at Biardio Clareno here, and nice personality, pretty good contact hitter, decent bat, not necessarily an incredible middle infielder, another guy who may be a man without a position, but for $1.4 million, you know, you could supplement somebody like that in with one of the big guns. So if you have thoughts on what you think we should do, always helpful for me to hear them. Let me know what you think of what we've done and what we've not done in free agency thus far. As we sit here on January 15th, Mr. Endo is still available. Still looking for about what we thought he was before. $9.62 million for 5 years, he says now. So he's actually looking for more years and more money. That actually probably makes it easier for me to say no to him. As I said, I don't have the same type of bitterness towards Mr. Endo as I have towards Mr. Gallo, since Mr. Endo did not actually play for the Yankees, but there's a lot of similarities. I mean, the difference is Gallo's got a better eye. Endo's a little better at BABIP, and we think Endo's going to actually strike out more than Gallo does. And when I look at it in that context, I'm not going to chase after Endo. I know some of you think I could potentially get him for a bargain and maybe flip him, but I kind of like the young infielders we have. We've added another one in the Rule 5 draft. If there's a bargain for Endo going forward eventually, I certainly wouldn't mind bringing him onto the roster, but for a guy who's got a couple of really huge holes in his game that bothers me, I'm going to only do it if I can do it on my terms. And with that, we will call it an episode. As always, thanks for watching. Thanks for the comments. Thanks for the input and guidance. And until our next episode, hope you have a great day.